Cool. We're live. We're recording. This is the first EIR Academy of 2023. Thank you guys for being patient with me. We had some family emergencies that came up earlier in the year, and life just happened. So this is the first one. Last year, we validated this idea. We've tested it. We put it out to you guys, and we validated it. Now, what we're looking to do is get more involved in helping the businesses actually scale. And some of the resources that we'll share with you today, these are free. These are brought to you by our partners like the Chamber of Commerce, right? Like the Ocala CEP, #1 chamber in the nations. They are investing in us, in our businesses. So this is a resource like paid for, sponsored by them. So super thankful for the Ocala CEP. The tech is provided by Mr. Chris Marshall with Ari. Ari, why don't you give a quick explanation of what Ari is? He's one of our tech partners.
Ari is a start-to-finish real estate investment platform, helping people get started or scale their real estate investing.
Very cool. So he's one of the Academy members, the EIR member, and he's also one of our sponsors because he knows how to do tech, and I don't. All right, so we talked about some of the resources. Today, we're going to be talking about the franchise business model. So you'll have an opportunity to hear two of our featured guests, their story, why they got into franchise, what they do in the world of franchises, and then I'm gonna ask them, pepper them with tons of questions, and then if you have questions, you'll be able to engage with them. So this is usually people charge money to get free, consulting work and ask all these questions. You guys are getting it for free. So make sure you ask them a ton of questions if you have questions about franchising. All right, next screen, please. All right, so Cultivate Advisors, one of the largest privately held advisory service, they have provided to us, this usually costs a lot of money, a ton of video training from financials to hiring to leadership. They have added a ton of resources, worksheets, all sorts of stuff for you guys to have for free. All right, so this is how you get it. We're going to bring them in to Ocala to do a workshop and some things in the future. The EIR Academy happens the second Wednesday of every month. I'm going to hand this around. This is the QR code just in case you didn't get it. On the back, please, name, business, email address. I'm not going to spam you. I don't do that. But I want to be able, as we get new resources, to give that to you, okay? And to keep you updated. All right, so you could turn that off. Quick history on what the EIR Academy is. It's something that I learned. I was building a fitness technology company and, cashed out government pension, went all in. And it got the attention of a venture capital group. And they're like, Josh, you're a mess. Your business is not ready to be invested in, but we have this spot for you. And it's called an EIR. And I'm like, what the heck's that? So I had to look it up. Entrepreneur in Residence. It's pretty much a place for entrepreneurs to come along, work inside a VC group. You get to be around other founders and people that have, different stages of business. Some are super successful and some are just like me getting started. So they're like, it's going to be a great spot for you. We're going to pay you. You're going to work on your own business. You're going to help us with our other businesses. I'm decent at like public relations, social media, and those kind of things and business development. So they're like, you're going to help us. But the entrepreneur in residence, like the theory of it was so neat, getting to work alongside other entrepreneurs having the same issues that I am, or maybe just a little bit further along. So when I came here to Ocala, I was talking with Kevin Shealy, the CEO of the CP. He's like, what do you think Ocala needs? And I said, I think we need to rub elbows with more founders like us, different stages, to find out what works, what doesn't work, and we could share our story. And he said, cool, build it. It's like, all right, so we started building the EIR Academy. We validated it last year. We're going to scale this, and then we're going to bring this model to other chambers across the nation. All right. So as we're getting started doing this, today we're going to be talking about franchises. So I'd like our guests to come on up. Give them a round of applause. Check, check. Check, check. Tech guy. All right. So the format today, as you'll see the sign-in sheet coming around. It's super fancy. The format today is I'm going to ask them questions. If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll make note of it. And then when we're done with the train of thinking, I'll call on you. So I'll help moderate this. This is all about them and you guys today. So I want to get out of the way as quickly as possible with that. With that said, if you're asking a question, please keep your question to like 30 seconds, right? This isn't to tell your story at this time. We'll have time afterwards to do more engagement. All right. So if you have a question, who do you want to answer the question? What is your question? Try to keep it about 30 seconds. Got it? Everybody agree? Cool. We're going to go to about 12:15, 12:30. I want you guys to have tons of opportunity to engage with these guys. All right. So let's kick off for today. With today's EIR Academy, we're going to talk about the franchise model. So what we're going to do is each person will have an opportunity to share who they are and what do they do in franchises. So Brian, why don't you kick us off?
So my name is Brian Mathis, and I'm an owner-operator of Chik-fil-A. My location is in the Villages, Florida. I've been an operator for 10 years and owner. So I started in the mall location here in Ocala and then gave that up a few years ago to move down to the Villages. Chick-fil-A is a very unique franchise model. So I didn't always want to be in the business world. I originally went to school with the intentions to do marine biology. Got to college chemistry and decided, yeah, no, not happening. So I was already working at Chick-fil-A. I had started working there when I was 15. And so was able to say, well, man, what am I going to do if I can't do marine biology? Because I had all my cards in that basket, and said, all right, my operator had done a great job, and he had really lived a comfortable life and seemed like he enjoyed what he did. And so I said, hey, what if I did that? And so I started pursuing that. So I got a degree in business management and started going through the path of what it looked like to be an owner operator of a Chick-fil-A, which is, there's various paths to get there. But the path that I chose was kind of the internal path, and it was working through steps. So I went and grand opened Chick-fil-A's that were new locations that were open. So I worked there for usually 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I would do various locations in California. I did Colorado, Tennessee, New York, like all over the place. And then I started running stores for Chick-fil-A that were in between owner operators. So if the operator got selected for another store in another place, that store would be vacant. And so I did that for 14 months. I did 7 months in Atlanta and 7 months in Lakeland, Florida. And during that time, had the opportunity come up to be able to get selected for the store in the mall. And so jumped on that opportunity, interviewed for it. It's a 20-week process. So you don't easily do it. That's for the internal candidates. For the external candidates, it's a 2 to 3 year process. So I went through the interviews for all of that and got selected for the store. Was there for, like I said, it's about 6 years. And when I moved to the Villages location, I'd actually applied for 7 other locations that got told no for. And each of those is a 20-week process. So it is a very, emotional journey of like, oh, I really like this. So this one came available. And then you apply for it. You do these essay questions and you go through the first round of interviews and they say, hey, we really like you. We're going to come visit you in person. And then for them to say, oh, we loved you. You were great. But we're not selecting you for this location. It can be very heartbreaking, but, kept my faith through all of it. Had a really great small group that helped me through it. But finally got told yes for the Villages, which was so great because I didn't have to move. I still live in Ocala, even though my store's in the Villages, because I'm too young to live there. So might as well live here. So yeah, just have really enjoyed the journey. Chick-fil-A is a great support system. They really have made it where for operators, it's a low financial buy-in. But it's our store. We're in charge of the people. We're in charge of the training. We're in charge of so much of it, but they give us a support system, which is what's so great with Chick-fil-A.
Super cool. Thank you for sharing. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into franchises and what you do in the world of franchises?
Sure. So my name is Chris Snook, and first I want to say that was an awesome story, and I almost wore that shirt today. So we would have been like twins. So I'm glad I dodged that bullet. But so specifically in the world of franchises, I own I'm part owner in a franchise down in the Villages, and I also kind of recruit or advise on people trying to get into franchises. So basically a consultant in that space. So so the journey was long. So I'll tell you, I'll go back a single step. Is what led to it was, I'll go back 2 steps. So I worked in the e-commerce space for roughly 10 years. Helped a local e-commerce company in the automotive space, basically build and grow that business. When I first started with them, we were doing about 15 million. The first year I finished with them, we did 15 million in annual sales, which was kind of a big deal. Continued to grow, and we had 15 employees at that time, and it was privately held until it wasn't. And then basically the venture capital firm that came in wanted to replace all the executives with people that they, liked and, had worked with in the past or whatever the case was. So unfortunately, all the existing executives had to go, of which I was one. But at that time, we had grown it from 15 employees and 15 million in annual sales to $250 million in annual sales and about 260 employees. So got to experience what it was like to work with a company with growth and everything like that. But, being part of that, I was in a position where I didn't even have my resume because I figured I was going to work at this place forever. I helped build it. I helped grow it. Executive, I figured it would be something that I did until I retired, and then I'd be done. So it was really kind of a challenging thing for me when they're like, called me in the office and told me that, HR is like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to eliminate your position and replace you with the guy that has, no experience, but he's friends with one of the venture capital guys. So that kind of hurt. So I had to kind of take a step back and decided I didn't really feel like working for anybody else anymore. So I have a lot of professional licenses. I have, my life insurance license and real estate license and some different things. So I looked at actually buying an insurance agency, looked at a few of them, but for different reasons, things just didn't really pan out. So then I kind of shifted gears, and I had met a lot of people just in talks and going around with different business owners, and I found it really fascinating all the different ways there are to make money. And that's really how I started in the e-commerce space. Was they made accessories for vehicles, and I just thought it was like this obscure thing, and they're making $15 million. Like, how is that? It's crazy. So I basically kind of, with my real estate license, talked with I was actually working with, I was looking at purchasing a insurance company down in the Villages, and I was at a networking function and met a gentleman that it was a business broker. And I'm like, huh. So I got talking with him, made friends with him, saw him at different networking functions. When when it ended up not going forward with the insurance company, I actually called him up. I said, hey, are you looking for somebody to come work with you? And he's like, no. I'm like, all right. So I stalked him a little bit more, and finally he's like, yeah. He's like, you're persistent enough. Just come work with me. It's fine. If you stop calling me, you can come work with me. So I went and worked with him for a while and helped him, list and sell businesses. And it was really fun because, again, you got to meet all kinds of different people and find all these different ways to make money that you would have never really thought of. I remember the first listing I got was a gentleman that sold wigs. And I'm like, I didn't even know, I wouldn't have even thought that was a thing. And it was just this old guy that was passionate about wigs and obviously, or maybe not obvious, but in the Villages, people get older and people start losing their hair. So men's, wigs and women's wigs and everything is just, it was just crazy. It just blew my mind. I'm like, how much? He's making a couple $100,000 a year selling wigs. I'm like, that's pretty cool. So anyway, I digress. But I got into that space, worked in that for a little bit, and then COVID came, and that made it exceptionally challenging for people to buy and for people to sell businesses for obvious reasons. So the owner of that company, it was basically just the two of us, but he wanted to kind of shift gears and focus more on franchises because, unlike a traditional business, franchises work a lot differently. They have systems in place. They have, most of the time they're, approved for financing through FBA. So even a startup, you can get financing for. So there's tons of benefits, and financing was one of the biggest challenges, at least what I found with buying and selling businesses. So long story short, I guess that wasn't that short, but I went ahead and we kind of shifted gears into the franchise consulting space. Bought into basically a company that had agreements with roughly 600 franchises. So the franchisors pay commissions on different things. So basically kind of shifted gears and have really been doing that since. I still do some e-commerce consulting. And like I said, I have a ownership in a franchise down in the Villages, but that's kind of my involvement with franchises, is helping people that I try to find people like myself that are either executives that were let go, or, you know, people that are just on the last end, or just somebody that just wants to work for themselves. So that's kind of been my focus, and kind of, I'll call it a passion because I can relate. So anyway.
Chris, thank you for sharing. So we're going to talk a lot about franchises, and I'm sure we all have questions about franchises, but let's talk about, you know, I'm a startup guy. I've started tons of things, and it is very difficult doing a startup, right? You have to come up with the idea, right? You have to do market validation. You have to create your own systems and processes, and there's a lot of work. Are there any startup people in here that have started a business on your own from, okay, so quite a few. All right. Not an easy event. With franchises, you're stepping into something that exists already, right? So let's start with Chris. When it comes to compare and contrast a startup versus a franchise, give us some of the why franchise.
So startup versus franchise. So in my space, there's obviously resales of franchises, but I focus more on kind of the startups on both sides. So the franchise, although the model's in place, it's basically you starting a business from scratch, but I hate all these terms, these generic terms, but like, in business, by yourself, for yourself, but not by yourself kind of stuff, like all these little taglines that they do with franchises. But there's benefits to a lot of things with a traditional startup, as far as you just starting your own company from scratch, to a franchise. Obviously, like I mentioned, the financing is one. Having the systems and everything in place. One thing I've in the more recent years of my life, I've really tried to focus on is leveraging money for time, as opposed to the other way around. What I mean by that is spending money to just basically provide yourself with more time, as opposed to trying to do things yourself to save money that are very time consuming. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old daughter. And I find that, with my 20-year-old daughter, I was in the e-commerce space and worked a lot of hours, and, I felt like I missed out on a lot of things. So now I basically had a pretty good spread between 6 and 20. So I feel like all the mistakes that I made before, I'm trying to, kind of hedge out a little bit. So going into a franchise, there's franchise fees, there's royalties, there's different things, but I feel like a big benefit of that is shaving off the time to figure the stuff out on your own. And I can talk forever, but
No, that's good. That's good. So, Brian, as we talk about franchises, right? You are owner operator, which operator, when I hear operator, I'm thinking like special ops guy or something like that, like operator stepping in. And, you work for and with one franchise. So as you're looking at that franchise model, what have you learned, and what kind of resources do they support, and why do you like the franchise model?
Yeah, for me, I owned my first store at 25. So I don't think I could have done that with many other businesses, but to be able to, buy into a Chick-fil-A and have my own Chick-fil-A at 25, and then provide the store, the equipment, the training for the team members, kind of that, they have the standards for us, the operating procedures. So, to cover yourself from liability when someone says, "Oh, I got sick from, your chicken," you say, "Well, we check every piece of chicken. It's 165 degrees. It's cooked in a, pressure fryer." Like, we have all the steps in place and the procedures that we follow that really help limit that liability that we could have. And then just as far as like pricing and that kind of stuff, like they're out there fighting for chicken prices. I'm not having to worry about what Cheney Brothers is charging for chicken in a given week. I mean, Chick-fil-A knows 6, 8, 12 months in advance what, commodity prices are going to be, what chicken price is going to be, and they're locking it in for long-term rates, which helps that. So, I mean, right now, year over year, I think we're at a 30% increase of cost of goods sold, but that could have been over 60 had they not been able to lock in some of that stuff. And so it's really been great just to have that support. I mean, they handle a lot of the financial side of things. I have an accountant through Chick-fil-A that handled some month-end reporting. They put all that together for me, and just really make it where I'm able to focus on the business, like serving my guests and serving my people and my team members that I have. I'm able to have my time spent on them, and in developing kind of that Chick-fil-A culture in them. It really does. It gives me more time for that, having the support of, a company like Chick-fil-A.
How many Chick-fil-A stores are there? Do you know, top of your head?
Yeah, I think we just crested over 3,000 total.
Okay. In 3,000 stores, you guys have tested, proved out stuff, new products, things that work, things that don't work. But you have a network that you can reach out to if you have a question or something. Talk about product development and testing out things. What has Chick-fil-A done that worked really well, and maybe stuff that they're like, nah, we're not going to use that?
Yeah. So, it's kind of the cycle. We go through cycles. So, there was a time where it was like everything had to be healthy. So we rolled out like a new kale crunch. We rolled out all these things, and, we got rid of coleslaw. And most places, they're okay with that. It was chicken salad first, then it was carrot and raisin, then it was coleslaw. And being in the villages, they still ask me when we're bringing it back every time. I'm like, it wasn't healthy. They're like, oh, we need a healthier option. I want your chicken salad. I was like, do you know how much mayonnaise is in that? Or they're, asking about the carrot and raisin salad. That has like 4 cups of sugar in it, right? Like, but they test products. Recently, y'all probably saw it, that they were going to delete the side salad. And hearing customer feedback, they said, hey, actually, we're going to keep it, and so they listen. But what they're realizing is the complexity on a lot of our team members of the amount of menu items that we offer, that we have to work towards simplification. But as far as training, so I went through something called the interim manager program that has changed cycles. And basically, it's a pipeline for operators. It's internal candidates that want to be operators. And so they have reworked that pipeline to get to a point where they're seeing very high success rates of the people that are accepted into that program that then become operators. There's operators like me that wanted to be in the Southeast. That makes it a little bit harder to find a location. If you're willing to go to California or Seattle, it's a lot easier. As they're developing new markets, North Dakota, I think they had to beg somebody to go up there. But it really worked out well. Like, I was able to work for Chick-fil-A and see the jobs that were coming available, see the stores that were coming available, and be able to apply for those, and already have that initial round of interviews that the externals have to go through. They know me, they know what I'm capable of, they know the work that I do, and so they're able to kind of churn that out and make the turnaround a lot quicker.
Chris, let's just say I'm an executive and I've worked somewhere for 15, 20 years, which I've never had a job that long. I'm an entrepreneur, right? But let's just role play here. And I just got laid off. I got a nice severance package, got a self-directed 401 or IRA or whatever. I got money in the bank, and I'm like, man, I'd like to maybe explore having my own business, right? And they come to you and they go, man, you got 600 franchises, and you go, and you walk them through the process of choosing one of those 600-ish. What does that look like?
So it usually doesn't work exactly that way. What it is they come for a specific franchise. They're already convinced that this is the one I want. I don't even want to look at any other ones. This is it. I already looked at what they require. I'm in, all in. And then as I kind of go through a questionnaire, I usually, I'll do a half hour to an hour kind of phone call with them just to learn more about them. I'd like, it's beneficial to find something that they at least care about or are passionate about would be preferred, because a lot of times it's just, I'll get people like I'm working with a gentleman right now. In the first conversation we had is, I need to make 6 figures in my first year, and I don't care what it is as long as it makes money. Well, there's a lot of things that make money. And 6 months, your first year making 100 grand, it's possible, but is it likely? Let's talk through some of this. So I basically go through a lot of different questions, try to get to know them. But they usually, like I said, have something in mind, and at some point, sometimes it's at the FD, like the franchise disclosure document. When they receive that, it throws a bunch of red flags, or sometimes it's the initial contact with the franchise themselves. Yes, it's going to be roughly 150,000 to get into this one, all in, but that covers you for the first 3 to 6 months, and then where are you at after that? Oh, you want to have a salary? Okay, well, if you want to try to pull immediately, then we need to look at some different things. So it's really a process. I really try to not there's some companies that would pay me more if I can kind of push them that direction. And I'm very cautious with doing that. I don't even look at like what a commission would be, per se on my end, because I want to try to make sure that I'm adding the value of finding the right fit. Because what makes me happy and excited is their success long term. So I don't want to put them in something that I don't think is beneficial to them, if that makes sense. You had mentioned something about the streamlining the menus and things like that, and that's actually just wanted to mention there's multiple like restaurants that I worked with that did the exact same thing, kind of more streamlined it. There's a book called Built to Serve, or no, Built to Sell. I'm sorry. There is a Built to Serve, but Built to Sell that kind of goes into that kind of idea. But anyway, it's good. So check it out.
Yeah. So when choosing the right fit, do you have something to add, Brian? Okay. When choosing,
Sure.
you're doing great there. When choosing the right fit, let's just say I come to you, and I'm like, I'm gonna buy a, what other type of franchise, and we start going through this process, and I go, wow, there's other things that I might not have considered. What are some considerations of choosing the right fit when a franchise? Before you answer that, Chris, we're going to do some audience questions. We had will you grab another mic? We only have 2 mics. Okay, I'll give up mine when that comes. So maybe you could do some running around with us. Don't give the mic to the person though, because they'll hold it forever. So you 30-second question. Remember when it comes time. So you'll be the first question, but let's do this with you. Is what are some considerations of choosing the right fit for choosing a franchise?
So the finance part becomes big. A lot of people want to try to sell finance, which is great if you have the cash to do that and the capital to do that. But knowing where your money's going to come from up front is obviously beneficial, because there's the startup costs. Like I'll give myself an example. So we did an AC franchise down in the Villages, my partner and I. So I don't know anything about AC. All I know is that it's Florida and it gets hot. And when my AC goes out, I have to get it fixed, right? So that's all I knew about it. So I went and I looked at a bunch of different franchises myself and with my partner, and we both kind of landed on one that was, kind of checked off some boxes with some different, things that they offered in their model and things. But they helped us with the licensing and everything else. I'm going to go off on a tangent. I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, so the question is, what are other considerations? So
front,
like financing, you didn't know a dang thing about AC.
No.
You need it. Like coming to a franchise, do I need to buy a franchise where I have a specialty or where I have, expertise?
So the finance thing is obviously crucial to know upfront, or at least have figure out if it's going to be, something that you can afford to do on yourself, if you need to bring in a partner, if you need to get financing. The other thing is I try to remind people that you shouldn't get into it unless you at least have an idea of how you want to get out. And what I mean by that is, when I was brokering businesses, quite a few times we would go to sell a business, and that business would be, family owned, husband, wife, kids, whatever. But they'd have this business and they'd have it, 20 years old, but they'd have, no systems in place. And in reality, there is no business without them. So the other thing is that a lot of them didn't even consider how to get out of the business until somebody got sick or ill or something, external thing happened. And at that point, it's extremely challenging to sell a business or maintain a business if that was your livelihood. So knowing what you expect, as far as if you're wanting to get into it, build it up and sell it. If you're wanting to get into it, have it run on cruise control and feed you that way. I mean, that part of the conversation, a lot of people don't plan or think about. But it's certainly, I mean, especially if you're going to spend, your money and time building something, like you need to know what you're building it for. Are you building it to pass on to your kids? Are you building it because, like I said, that's a big consideration. And then how, what's your objective? Are you trying to build $100 million company? And if so, do you have the capability to do that with that particular model? With franchises, they typically have protected territories. So, if your territory is only big enough to constitute a $2 or $3 million business, 100 million's, kind of out of the question. So, all those are kind of factors that need to be addressed. Looks like Brian wants to say something.
I don't have to worry about that stuff. We're good.
So we have a question. Yeah, thank you. We have a question, 30-second question. Name, who are you?
So my name is William Saunders, and I own Exterior Pride Power Washing. And I'm just curious, and you guys said you've done many franchises and everything. What's the most profitable franchise?
You can talk about the money side of Chick-fil-A if you want.
Okay.
And then
So-
you could go as well.
Okay, so for Chick-fil-A, the buy-in for Chick-fil-A is only $10,000. Now they get a lot more of the profits. So they take 15% off the top line, and then they split profits 50-50 of what's left. So very low threshold to get in. Now the selection process is probably the biggest threshold to get a Chick-fil-A. But once you are selected, it's a low threshold. But they also take a lot. But now we do have Chick-fil-A's that are 17 and $20 million that are doing extremely well. There's malls that are lower volume. My store is a little above average in the Villages. We're closed for remodel, so we're planning to be well above average when we reopen. But it really just depends.
So the short answer is a successful one. So there's, as far as franchises, if you're looking at franchises, there's, forgive me for the exact statistic, but I feel like 64-ish or something like that % of franchises never sell their first franchise. So like out of the 600 that I deal with, I usually eliminate about 200 to 300 of them right off the bat. So one of the qualifications I have if I'm working with someone after I go through a kind of question, if I figure out what they're looking at, what their financial situation is I have certain criteria that I look at. I look at how many operating units they have, how long they've been in business, how many corporate-owned stores they have, if any. But that kind of gives me an indication of where they're at. Then if it's a company I haven't worked with before, because I haven't worked with 600 of them, I'll reach out to them. A lot of times they'll provide me with an FDD. It's a little more of a process for a candidate, but I'll go through and try to see, I'll analyze how many franchises have they had open versus how many have closed. And if they've had some close, why did those close? I went through the same thing with myself with the AC company. They had a bunch of openings, but the year before, the last year in the FTD that we had, they had 3 closures. I'm like, well, why'd they have 3 closures? Like, I don't want to spend a couple $100,000 of my own money and then, have to have something close. What were the circumstances? So those are things that you need to be, keep your eye open for. But to answer your question, the successful ones are the most profitable. I mean, I don't know a good answer to that. So sorry.
Tyler had a question in the back. And then, what's your name, sir? Miles.
Yep. So Tyler Calametro, CEP. Talk about what are some of the challenges that the franchise business model addresses for those people that might not have a more expansive business education, right? Like, so how does going into a franchise versus cooking from scratch, right? Make you is a little bit more. They have a tendency to be more successful for those who haven't, say, gone to business school or et cetera. Like if you're coming from white collar, blue collar.
So generically speaking for a minute. So as far as like startups, like if just a startup, fast forward 10 years, the numbers vary depending on what you're looking at, but typically, less than 10% of those businesses will still be around 10 years later. On the flip side, with a franchise, it's typically when you hit the 10-year mark, 90% of those are still around. And really the reason behind that is because one, they do have a vetting. The good ones are going to have a vetting process, and they also have all the systems and processes and everything that you would typically stumble over as a as a startup. They've hopefully figured out and ironed out a lot of that stuff. A lot of the things like with marketing, what your target demographic is, having actually the marketing material and all that stuff. All of that is beneficial. And again, you pay for that, but the idea is, you're paying for it, but you're paying for it up front for hopefully a faster, profitable path than the other way around. You know what I mean? So
before you answer, you started at 25 years old, first ownership of a business, which is incredible. How old are you now? Okay, cool. So you've been doing it for 10 years. What kind of training, what kind of things did they do for you, for leadership, for this or that like I might have had to learn the hard way because I was on my own starting a business?
Yeah, so even external candidates go through something called fundamentals, or we call it FRL. But it is a training where you learn the Chick-fil-A systems. You learn back office, like what we have to do for day close, that kind of accountability. You learn, the legal side of things, making sure that we're covering ourselves legally. So that's a 3-week process. And so, we spend 3 weeks of intense learning, of getting kind of that crash course of ownership. Me coming up, I was able to be trained for procedures from being a grand opening certified trainer, and then going into the IM program, I kind of got a crash course in all of that. So it was a lot less intense going through that well, I'm no longer working for corporate, I'm working for myself. So the legal side of that was a little different. Surprisingly, corporate covers their butt a lot more than I have to cover my own, being as big as they are. But they provided all that. So, I have something called Pathways where I can go and I can look up any procedure that we have. So I can look at from start to finish, whatever we need to do to be able to have it done. And so all of that is available to me. There's ongoing training that we can go to, that we learn more about. They've understood, and we share as an operator community. Hey, this is what we did for leadership. This is how we're solving this problem. This is what we're seeing. And we're able to kind of pull from those resources to help us if we're struggling in an area that somebody else has already overcome.
Very cool. We have a question in the back with Mr. Miles.
Hi, my name is Miles Allen. What are some of the indicators of a franchise that is expandable versus a franchise that you're, quote, just buying yourself a job?
So you'll figure that out sooner than later in most cases. But again, the what I would call the good franchise, and what I mean by that is simply the ones that have proven track record and actually have sold franchises. They all have a system in place where you are not the sole operator. At least that's their goal, right? They to be able to scale, you can't do everything yourself. So all the good, like for example, there's painting franchises, and you think like, oh, well, why would I pay, $150,000 to get a painting franchise going when I can go out and, do my business license and grab some brushes and a truck, But their whole model is one, systems. Now they also have discounts and things like that in place for volume as the franchise. So you'd be able to buy, paint, for example, for 40% less than somebody just going in starting from scratch. So there's benefits there from buying power, and also from quoting and making sure you don't underquote jobs and things like that in software. But connections, like for example, they have they'll have connections with all the like Sherwin-Williams, for example, like all the managers and also all the subs that are in your local area. So that particular, the one I'm thinking of, that particular model basically has it to where The only thing you would do if you did anything besides, manage the business is potentially do the sales and quoting, but you're not picking up a paintbrush once, and that's scalable. And ideally, what you would do is you would train a salesperson, and they kind of map all this stuff out. Like even like with my AC company down in the Villages, I have kind of a regional sales advisor that's here this week, that's down there with our guys, just reiterating processes and making sure they're following all the steps and things like that. Things that I, could and should be doing if I knew anything about AC, but it's basically just what they're doing, because you got to keep in mind too, one of the things that they get paid on is the royalties, or, continued income on what you're producing. So if you're not producing and you're not growing, then they're not, it's a kind of a mutually beneficial relationship. They want you to grow. It benefits them, benefits you. So, anyway.
Thank you. So, Chris, before you ask your question, Brian, at Bible study the other night, you were talking about a picture that you have from a special event that happened for you. So I'd like you to talk about that. And then as you share that, like I went to a Chik-fil-A in Miami, and then I go to the Villages, and you could talk about like the continuity and why that's beneficial for you guys. So, tell us that story, and then talk to us about different experiences, different places.
So the event he's talking about. So when I was going through the training to become an operator, I had the opportunity to get to know one of Truett Cathy, who's the founder of Chick-fil-A. He started the Dwarf Grill, which is now the Dwarf House in Atlanta. Got to know one of his grandsons really well, and said, "Hey, I'd really love to go see your grandfather's car collection." He had this like very renowned car collection. He had built so many barns on his property. They told him that he couldn't build another structure on his property. So he just doubled the size of one of his other ones so that he could get past that. But he had, at one point, he had the largest private collection of Rolls Royces, either in the Southeast or maybe the United States, but just had all these crazy cars. He had a car that like Mike Tyson owned, but then couldn't pay for. So it got repoed and he bought it. It was it was just crazy cars. I was like, man, I really want to go see this. And so they set it up and actually had one of the grandkids come and give us a tour. And so we're going through his 6 garages, and we're just seeing like a DeLorean, all these like old Rolls Royces, this incredible stuff. And sure enough, and they were like, Truett's home, but he's on conference calls. He won't be able to make it out to see y'all, but he sends his best. Well, we're on like the 3rd or 4th garage. And all of a sudden, this old man who's 90 comes walking in, and he's like, "Y'all come to see my cars?" And he showed us through these, and he has a story for every single one of those cars. That was his passion. I mean, he was over 50 when he started Chick-fil-A. When he created the chicken sandwich, he was in his 60s. Like to think about what life looks like, to start that late and to be so great. But at the end of this tour, he's like, "Y'all come on to the kitchen. I've got some snacks. Y'all come and we'll talk." And I had the opportunity to sit with this man and his wife in his kitchen and just hear from his heart. And that is something that so many people at Chick-fil-A, they don't have that opportunity. He passed away like 6 years ago. And so, to have that memory and to have that time that I spent sitting in his kitchen with him and his wife, sitting around a kitchen table, eating horribly stale pretzels, is something that I'll never forget. And it has been so impactful to have that and have that memory of I'm carrying on Truett's legacy. Truett was a generous person. Truett was someone who developed people. He cared more about the people than necessarily the profit sometimes. And being able to model that is so important. What was the other part of that?
So we have a question from Chris Marshall.
So I'd love to hear some of the limitations of being a franchise owner. I was told when I was looking at purchasing a Chick-fil-A that I would have to be the manager, and I just wanted to purchase the right to have a store in our town and then find someone to be the manager of that store. And then there's been other things like you can't own other businesses, you can't start another business. What are some of the limitations?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of why it is owner operator. They want us to be involved. They don't want us to be a hands-off operator. There are operators that have multiple locations. Now, the limitation to that is they have to be in the same trade area. They have to be pretty close to each other, so that it's more of you're owning, 2 Chick-fil-A's in the same community. But they put that in there because they don't want us to be checked out and it just be like a Taco Bell or a McDonald's or a Burger King that's just doesn't have that leadership and that vision casting regularly. There's no set time limit. There's not a oh, you have to be in the store X number of hours. I mean, there's operators that are to the point in life where they're really not necessarily in the restaurant. They're more at an offsite office, having conversations with leaders. But they want you involved. It's not, they don't want people that are just trying to buy up a bunch of franchises because they hear Chick-fil-A's are hugely successful and hugely profitable. They want it to be your passion. They do put limitations on owning other businesses. They don't want us to be primary owners of other businesses or be such a stake in another company that it takes us away from Chick-fil-A or is a competing. So there are a lot of operators that have real estate where they do a lot with real estate, or they do consulting where you're able to consult new businesses, especially whether it be other restaurants or other service industries, where we're able to consult and help them grow and kind of teach some of the things that Chick-fil-A has that makes us unique. We're able to teach that to others to help them and give them a leg up for that. And it is so. When people do apply and they get, last I heard, they get 100,000 expresses of interest in owning a Chick-fil-A each year. They return roughly about 10,000 invitations to fill out an application. And of that, they select about 35 to 40 operators a year. And it is a, usually for externals, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 year process. And it depends on where you want to be. So to say, hey, I want to own a Chick-fil-A here, in the current state, they'd probably laugh at you and say good luck. In the Southeast in general. Now, if you're like, hey, I'm a business person up in, somewhere up north, they'd probably be like, yeah, hey, let's start this conversation. But it is extremely competitive and it takes a lot. And you have to have some, at this point, some Chick-fil-A experience. You got to have some business experience to be able to own a Chick-fil-A. And they do the selecting process. So you have to go through this very deep, very intimate process with them to get to know you. And then they're deciding like, hey, we want you to run this Chick-fil-A for us. We want you to own it and be your baby. We have never closed a freestanding restaurant because of low performance ever, which is malls. Now we're getting to the point where malls obviously are closing. But usually it's not just because of the Chick-fil-A that's underperforming, it's the mall is closing or the rent package and everything is changing. But, to be at the volume we are is incredible. To say that we don't close them because they're underperforming. We're having to pick them up and move them somewhere bigger because we need more space. We need more land to do it. For us, we're landlocked, but they're literally gutting my store, tearing out the parking lot, rerouting everything to try to get us the capacity that we need to serve the Villages community.
Yeah. Looking good. Chris, what are some limitations? So you've seen 600 of them. You have one yourself. What are some limitations? To follow up on the question, what are some limitations that you've seen in franchises?
I would say probably the biggest one is the non-compete portion of it. If it's something where you, like with my AC one, for example, I have basically 10 years of 1 hour with, where that can only be my one AC company, right? So I can't go buy one. They're down in the Villages. I can't buy a different one in Ocala. Can't do anything like that. But at the end of that 10 years, whether it's my option to renew or try to sell before that point, the catch is if I decide not to renew, then all my customers I built up in that time period are theirs. You know what I mean? Plus, I'll have a non-compete in that area. So they basically want you to either continue and renew or not. But either way, those customers are theirs. So there are some limitations as far as that's concerned. But in fairness, if you were to build up an AC company from scratch and sell it, no buyer would purchase that without a non-compete anyway. So I don't know that it's detrimental as far as that part goes. There's a lot of models that don't allow for absentee, like Chick-fil-A apparently. So you have to have some type of involvement. But there's others that are okay with the absentee because of their model. As long as you have the capital to sustain it through the growth, and you have somebody that's that's capable of managing it and running it, it's not bad. So there's pros and cons, but if you get into it and it's something that's your field, then you need to make sure that that's what you want to do, and have an exit strategy before you commit. But
So your name and who's your question, or what's your question? Who's it for?
Hey guys, my name is Judith with Fee Slasher. My question is, I have like 4, but I'm going to condense them, I think, is what would be the most important elements, systems, or characteristics for a business to become a successful franchise from a startup business?
Good question. And then we'll go to Carl in the back, and then Paul.
So I'm actually working with a company now that's trying to franchise, and we're putting together some of the software and systems and everything in place. But all right. Having something unique, whether it's an actual system, if it's like an AC company that there's thousands of in Florida, having something that sets them apart, or having something that is a unique model. Like there's a newer one that I was looking for somebody the other day, and I stumbled across this one, and it was a 3D printing. So it's like they have, I think it's a 3D shrink or something like that is the name of the company, but they basically have it's a mobile trailer that you take to like events, and it has a ton of different cameras on the inside, and it'll snap a picture, but instead of it being like a photo booth, it actually like prints out like a 3D like version, like a G.I. Joe action figure. But so anyway, so I started looking into it and watched some videos on it and some stuff from the owners. And it was actually, it was pretty cool. I don't know if, it's relatively new. I think they have like 5 franchises sold so far, which is better than 0. But it was just kind of neat. Like they had a lot of feedback with like, grandparents, like, oh, while grandma's here in town, like I want to, her with the kids and like a little 3D model. So it's kind of neat, whether it's trendy and whether it's something that'll catch on or not, I don't know. And I didn't look at the pricing of what the, 3D model costs, but, it has low overhead at least, and it was a neat, idea. So, there's stuff like that, but some uniqueness in some capacity. So whether it's a procedure or product or something, just make it different.
To follow on that question, what are some of the things needed to become you mentioned an FDD, you meant, systems, processes, operations. Are there any other thing? Because I can't just say, I'm good at whatever, and I'm just going to create a franchise. What are some of the things that must be in place legally and to ensure this will be a good model for other people to follow?
So unfortunately, if you have, $50-ish thousand, you can pay any attorney to write up a FDD for you. There's a lot of companies that think they want to franchise from a financial standpoint. So they think like, oh, I have this business, I want to franchise it and make millions of dollars off royalties. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. So again, having something unique, having something that's in place, having something that's duplicatable, I think is one of the biggest things. If it's something where, you don't have every single aspect of the business dialed in to where, you could take the company in Ocala that started here and move it to, Texas, and it not get almost identical results, then there's something missing. So that's actually one of the things I'm working with this particular company after we get everything kind of established and all of our uniqueness taken care of. We're going to try to see what we can do in some different areas, but.
Can I add something? Yeah, I'll add one more thing. So that's the thing. So like when me and my family travel, we eat at Chick-fil-A's. Like, what is a Chick-fil-A known for? We're known for great hospitality, great service, great food, usually a clean restroom. Especially taking kids and taking them into the potty. Like you've hit some gas stations that you regretted. And so that cleaning procedure and that people, what we're looking for in the people and some of that basic stuff, that Chick-fil-A has helped kind of craft that. And they have, made that, we call it the core 4, but it's creating eye contact, staying connected, sharing a smile, speak enthusiastically. Those are the basics that we have. That's like the very bottom of it, but that's something that you see across the board. The my pleasure, something that you see across the board, and it sets us apart. And so to be able to visit a store in Miami or a store that's in North Dakota, they say my pleasure as well. Their teeth are chattering when they say it, but they're saying it. And so that's very important. Like the systems that we have in place, those systems are followed everywhere. And Chick-fil-A does a great job of ensuring that we're following the systems, that chicken sandwich that you get is the same chicken sandwich, whether it's, any part of the country. What was that core for again? Yeah, create eye contact, share a smile, speak enthusiastically, and stay connected.
Thank you. My name is Carl Flanagan, Primerica Advisors. My question's for Chris. It's kind of a two-part question. Number one is that, in particular on franchises, both of you have said that if you go into a franchise, they're not going to let you fail. Is that because they vetted you up front initially to determine whether you are a fit or not? Before they bring you in, and then that they're 100% behind you. And if you tend to falter and stumble, that they're going to identify that and then step to your aid to help bring you back up.
Okay. Just want to make sure the question was on.
Okay. There is. Okay. The other part is that with both of you in particular is that, if you go into a franchise where your price tag is say $10,000, and you have to give up a lot for both the royalties and the percentage of profits. Are you able to enter to an agreement? Obviously, you're in an agreement, but are you able to modify that to say, now that I've got more cash? Because let's face it, when we get into these situations, we may be strapped for cash to begin with, so we're going to go in with the least amount possible, and then later would we be able to readjust the agreement to give them more cash for less profit?
So to kind of sum it up, when it comes to failing and, like when you get yourself into trouble, what kind of support can you expect from a franchise? And then are the terms negotiable with Chick-fil-A and Zet? So those are the two questions.
So it sounded like you were asking about vetting or interview process from the franchisor side of things. And a lot of people are under the impression that as long as they're able to pay the franchise fee and write that check, that they're automatically guaranteed. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Or maybe it's fortunate for obvious reasons. But I had a gentleman not too terribly long ago that had, I think he had $300,000 ready to go, and the franchise he was looking at was probably $100,000 all in. But through the interview process, they actually decided not to go with him. He had experience, but one of the things for that particular model was communication, and he had an accent. And as bad as it was for them to say it, they're like, I just don't think that he would be able to communicate and it come across professionally like he's going to have a hard time communicating with other business owners and things like that with his accent. So we don't know that he'll be successful in it. Maybe he would be, maybe he wouldn't, maybe you could overcome that, but we're not willing to make that, to risk it. Just to piggyback off that, going back to the FTD, like I mentioned, they break down, how many stores they had open, how many stores they had closed. And they realize that people look at that. I mean, it's anywhere from a 40 to 400 page document, and people comb through it. And one thing that would always come up is if you had a franchise that had more closures than openings. Like that's obviously a red flag. So they do whatever they can to vet and interview up front to eliminate that. I had another gentleman that was looking at a home healthcare type thing, like elderly care, and they for various reasons, they felt like they wouldn't be as involved in the community as this particular model required. So that was another one that they, it was basically somebody that just wanted to buy it and have their kids kind of run it and thought it would be on autopilot. And they're like, no, we want them involved. And if they're not willing to do that, then we're good. So, so that's that. So they do, interview and vetting process. And then I'm sorry, the second part was, so generally the answer is no. Like it's in writing, everybody's the same. The only thing is sometimes they'll have options. So like, for example, there's some franchises that will say, okay, it's 25,000 up front. This is how much it's going to cost you to get everything going. And it's 8% royalty. And they'll have another option that says, okay, instead of the 25, it's $2,000 down and it's 12% royalties for X number of, period of time. So there are some that fall into that category to give options, but as far as like a negotiable thing, that's not with anything that I can think of off the top of my head. It's black and white. These are your choices, and that's how it works. And they have minimums if. Oh, sorry.
Well, you can finish your train of thought. That's fine. Yeah. So with Chick-fil-A, what happens when you run into tough times and they need to step in? And are the terms negotiable?
So the terms are not negotiable. So the only change that there has been since the operator agreement started, which it used to be a handshake, was initially it was only $5,000, and that was the buy-in up until I think 5 years ago they made it $10,000. So it's $5,000 just to be like you're kind of buying into Chick-fil-A saying, hey, I'm gonna be an operator, and then there's a per store of $5,000. So it's not negotiable. I mean, the great thing is that you're in a partnership with Chick-fil-A. It's ironclad. There are people that have tried to fight it. I mean, it's solid. And then as far as like operators who get in trouble, so Chick-fil-A, they don't want an operator to fail. I mean, there's certain unforgivables that like food safety is one of them. Like if you're below a threshold of food safety, like they're gonna give you pay tons of money to help you. But if you can improve and they say, hey, this is a problem that's not going to be fixable, then they will terminate that operator agreement. There's crimes, obviously, any relations with team members, drugs, criminal arrests, which, I mean, that's the thing is, if we had someone who was in a hit and run, they were arrested, but it wasn't them. They were falsely accused of it. But Chick-fil-A doesn't jump to conclusions. They say, hey, we're gonna help you out. We're gonna put somebody running your store for you while you get this sorted out. And it took like 6 months for it to all get sorted out. But once it was done, it was like, hey, we've got your back through this. Chick-fil-A does have our back. They definitely do. Now, they're especially younger people. They get in and they get into these stores out in Podontville that are really high volume on an expressway, and they start making a lot of money very quickly at a young age. And they make some mistakes, and some of those mistakes are unforgivable, but Chick-fil-A usually exits them very quietly. They don't make a big spectacle out of it. They're able to go in and take over that location and get somebody else in there to help be that beacon for the community. So I had my store was an operator termination in the Villages, resign termination, and then in the mall was the same thing. So I've followed in a couple operators that have left on varying terms.
Thank you.
Solar trainer Paul. So my question, and it might be directed more toward Chris, is because I've heard of different franchises in the past, and let's say like McDonald's, like the $1 million buy-in, and you got to be there all the time, and you got all these things you're in charge of, and at the end of the year, bottom line, some of these big name franchises are maybe they're only netting 30 or 50,000 a year, which is like a job and not a great one or whatever. And I mean, I know another one that's an owner of a national franchise here in town. It's in the food industry. I won't say what. And his thing is like, well, they keep coming out with these $6 box lunch specials, and it's killing me because we're making like little to no margin on it. And I need to make money on the other items I sell. So how do you see that with some of these, maybe a larger one, maybe because they're more proven and they take more piece of the pie? And then what's the net for the owner?
Hello. All right. That might be a good question for Brian, so I'll make him talk too. But Because so food. So let me just answer one question real quick, or wasn't a question, but I'll ask it myself. Food is something that I don't generally work with. It's not that if somebody was interested in that and it was truly a good fit, I would, but it's not. Restaurants in general, regardless of how good the model is, are not, outside of Chick-fil-A, obviously, are not super easy to get successful because of various things. You know, McDonald's is one that they are known worldwide, so that's a little bit different. You know, I specialize more in like the $500,000 below kind of threshold, which isn't going to get you much in the way of the big national brands. But it really depends on just the market and how involved the person is and how good the model is. You know what I mean? As far as like what you're talking about with super thin margins and things like that. I mean, the answer to that is volume, right? Now, some franchises allow for some some different pricing, and other ones have caps. You know, I've worked with one where, you know, they want to increase prices because cost of goods have gone up, and the franchise caps, you know, the most that they can sell the product at. So they consider that a hindrance. So that's something that they're working through. So, you know, I would believe in the food industry that would be more prevalent, because to be competitive in that arena, you would have to have, you know, lower prices. I would guess. I'll just stop talking about Brian talk here.
So, so I know Subway. So Subway owners came together and fought the $5 footlong. They weren't making the profits on the $5 footlong. So they're like, hey, you need to limit it and find out how to make it more profitable for us. The great thing with Chick-fil-A is we don't discount. Truett from the very beginning said, I'd rather give you something free than discount my product, because my product is not inferior. I'm not discounting it because it's lesser. I'd rather you have the whole item free so you can taste it and see how great it is. That's where people get in trouble, is in that of like, hey, we're going to discount it, or like, you know, the super cheap option that's a nationally promoted thing that the operators or the people that are the business owners are like, I can't make any money on this. Like, why are we doing this? You know, for us recently, when lettuce prices shot through the roof, every salad I was producing, I was losing money on. And so, you know, in the Villages, we sell a lot of salads, but I knew it was short lived, and it wasn't corporate, like putting the screws on us. It was like, hey, they have droughts in California, it ruined the crop, or and it was excessive rain. And, you know, so there is that, as being a business owner that has that ebb and flow. But Chick-fil-A does set our prices. They look at a value-based model. Each store, you know, they look at each store individually. So I'm not clumped with like the whole Southeast is this. They look at my minimum wage, they look at all these things, and they want our profit to be at a certain point, but they also want the guest to feel like it's a value. So I don't know if you've priced chicken sandwiches lately. Everybody thinks Chick-fil-A is expensive, but you go to McDonald's and you're paying $2 more for a chicken sandwich. You go to Panera, you're paying $4 more for that chicken sandwich. Really, for the value of what you're getting is what they focus on so much.
You guys do provide the value.
Yeah.
The quality.
Yeah.
Hi, this question is for Chris. I'm John Civalero with TD Bank, and I'm a small business specialist. I focus on lending. I see all the time customers come in. I want to buy this franchise. I don't have any cash, maybe $5,000. They're no net worth. They just lost their job or whatever. So it's like a cry for help. What type of, and their credit stinks. So
You didn't mention that.
They don't tell you that until the end, you know? So my question to you is, when you're vetting those people out, are you going through the credit questions? You're asking for net worth, you're looking for cash. What are some of those questions you're asking to those folks?
So I will tell you, yes. I do ask those questions because they're important to know up front. You know, it's not necessarily the first question I ask, but within that first, half hour to hour kind of meeting that I have with them, it absolutely comes up. And it's not that there's not, some cases can be overcome, but I want to know up front what's happening or what I'm dealing with. If for no other reason, to at least let them know what they need to get straight. And I certainly don't like wasting my time. Like I said, I'm trying my best to leverage time as best I can. So I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time. Like, it's best to just kind of cut to the chase. It happens. I get it. Like, people get divorced, people lose jobs. Like these roadblocks happen. And depending on how well you were prepared for that particular life event, kind of dictates where you can go from there. I probably need to get your card because I don't know if you deal outside of Florida or nationwide or whatever, but one thing I've done here more recently is I don't like the financing aspect of it at all because of all the hoops and different things that people have to jump through. If they're already, if they're well qualified, that's one thing. But if they come and say, hey, I have a 600 credit score and I have $5,000 in the bank and I need to start making at least $8,000 a month starting next month, that's not something I can really help you with. Start to finish, going through the franchise process, even if it was something where the first franchise that I suggested to you, you absolutely fell in love with it, and I set up the interview the following day, and you went ahead and signed the FDD a day after that, it's still going to be typically months before you're in a position where you can open your doors. You have to actually find a location in some scenarios. You have to buy equipment. You have to find employees, which isn't the easiest thing to do. That's a big challenge for pretty much every business owner, franchise or not. So, there's a lot of that. But to answer your question, yes, I asked as many questions as I can up front so I know what's happening. If they're going to partner with somebody that has money, or however that works, all those questions come up. So.
We have a question, Judith, and then Mr. Miles again.
So for those of you who know what I do, this is going to sound self-serving, but that's not where it's coming from, okay? To be clear. I have worked with a lot of different franchise owners who are not allowed to bring in subcontractors for some things, and for other things they are. So my question is, how many franchises allow that, and how often do you see that as a barrier where they wind up getting so big that they're not getting the cost savings that maybe they should be getting as a franchise while they're running a small business, essentially?
And what I want is I do want this to be serving to you as well. She does credit card processing. She's fee slasher, right? And cost analysis. So one, will franchises allow it? And two, maybe, how do you get into a franchise? So if she is trying to break into some franchises. So both you guys asked this.
So Chick-fil-A, as we've grown and we've scaled, they used to do everything in-house, and now they've slowly kind of peeled back and said, hey, we're going to get you to go and do this yourself, like health insurance. It was something that Chick-fil-A handled for so many years. And finally they were like, hey, so we're going to need y'all to go get your own health insurance. And it was like this big, oh my gosh. So there's more and more things. And they really do give us the freedom, but they kind of give us guardrails. So like, it may be hey, here are some recommendations. Hey, this is what you may want to look for. These are some questions you may want to ask. I mean, they give us that for, our CPAs, like or whoever's doing our taxes, like, hey, these are some questions you're probably going to want to ask them because your franchise model is very unique. So for us, like, yes, I use subcontractors for a lot of cleaning and stuff. And even now with labor shortages, we're using third parties, and it really is, approaching the people, but approaching the right way. When you get the no, don't continue to nail it home, and then don't, just dig down the person. There's nothing worse than getting an email that is like directed at the store, like generalization. Then all of a sudden it's like they got my personal work email, and then it's like, hey, I sent you 7 emails and you haven't responded yet. Like, yeah, take a hint. Yeah. and then they show up and it's like, how'd you know I was working today?
It's kind of a hard question to answer. There's, as a lot of these companies, a lot of the franchisors grow, the bigger they get, the more they're able to leverage their size and try to, get cost savings internally. So without knowing specifics, it's hard for me to generalize on, that portion of it. Sure.
Okay, so as a really brief example, like working with a college or working with a franchise, I've had times where we've been able to renegotiate a whole bunch of the contracts that have been in place for them as a business owner, and that's been able to lower their overheads, though the systems were still the same in place.
So that should help me, but it really doesn't. So there's certain legal portions of it within the FDD. So like, somebody that was a franchise, that's been a franchisee for 20 years, had a completely different agreement 20 years ago than they put out now. And sometimes they allow for like hybrid things as far as like, okay, like you are grandfathered in on this, but we can add this part. So again, it's hard to say. I will say that in most cases, if it's something where it's truly a cost savings thing and it makes sense, most franchisors have the flexibility to, I don't want to say waiver, but to help benefit the franchisee if they know about it. You know, there's a lot of things where, again, you know, success is key, right? So there are some franchises that, you know, they're getting paid on total volume, so they don't care how much the owner ends up netting at the end of the day, as long as that number continues to grow or is stable. But most, like I say, of the good franchisors want success. They want their franchisees to talk. I mean, one of the things, you know, in the vetting process, you know, they'll interview a potential candidate, but they also, you know, after you get the FDD and it's something you want to do, they'll give a list of franchisees, typically as long as you want, for you to reach out and validate, hey, is this something I want to get into? Like, let me talk to somebody. I mean, you know, talk to somebody that opened 6 months ago, talk to somebody that opened 6 years ago, you know, whatever the case is, just to find out, hey, you know, what's your experience? You know, they've been telling me this, they've been telling me I can make this, they can, you know, whatever the scenario is. And by the way, they don't tell you how much you can make, because that's a big no-no with franchise stuff. But, you know, they're telling me these will be my costs or whatever. You know, did you see the same thing? You know, as far as the growth model, you know, within 18 months, you know, this should be your trajectory. Are you seeing that? You know, they said you get this type of discount on this product. You know, how did that pan out? You know, that type of thing. So having open lines of communication are key with the franchisee and franchisor. So anyway.
So before you, it is 12 o'clock. We're going to go till about 12:15, because I want you guys to be able to, you know, come and chat with them. So we've got about 12 more minutes before that happens. So Mr. Jim, go for it.
Yeah, I'm Jim with usemowersonline.com. And curious, you mentioned staffing or temporary work. Did that apply to staffing? Because I thought about having a staffing for landscapers, because they.
Yeah, so we have a cleaning crew that comes in every night and cleans and sanitizes the whole restaurant, and so they are based out of Orlando, and so they started in Orlando, taking people that are in the process of applying for citizenship or for green cards that I wouldn't technically be able to hire them, but they're in the process, so they're able to hire them, and then we use them as a third party for staffing. They help us a lot with kitchen staffing. But a lot of them don't speak English, so it would be hard to put them on front counter. But it's been great. It's solved our need. And there's restaurants, Chick-fil-A restaurants in the Orlando area that basically that third party staffing is their entire kitchen, and it's solved that need because they're actually going and seeking those employees, and those you know, employees that wouldn't necessarily be able to just walk into a regular store and get hired. They're helping them, so they get a cut of what they get paid, but they also help them through the legal process. Like, they have lawyers that are literally working each of their cases to help them get citizenship. So it's kind of a win-win, whereas we win in getting staff, but those people also win in getting their citizenship. No, actually it's not, surprisingly. So their rate before we closed was, I think it was like $13.75. And I mean, that's kind of our base rate, but they want them to start at that. Now we do give them raises, but they want them to start at that. But we're starting full-time employees at like $15.50. So
Right now, how many employees do you need to hire? Because we've talked about this in the past.
yeah, we're looking to hire about 70 people to reopen. So we got down to 50. We're going to retain probably, I think, 30 or 40 of those, and we're trying to get to 120. So yeah.
Got a question in the back, Mr. Miles, and then Heather.
Wow, 70 employees for a Chick-fil-A. That's
Oh,
a
we
lot.
yeah, 120
Right.
is where we need
Right.
to be.
Yeah, you got to get 70 more. My question's for Chris, and it's kind of a follow-up on my original question. But how many franchises out there have if you open your store, and I'm recognizing that not everything's a physical store, but if you open your franchise, customers will come to you because of who you are, the franchise entity in and of itself, versus I'll use your painting contractor example you used earlier in your discussion. you have to go out and hustle and go find your customers?
So with trying to think of the shortest way to answer this. So I'll tell you with my current like portfolio with the 600 I have. So within that network, most of them are names that you may or may not have heard of that have anywhere from, 0 to, 400 or 500 nationwide franchise. Most of them are in the, 50 to 150 range, where the name recognition is there for some, but not others. So a lot of the larger companies, once they hit a certain threshold where people know to look for like Chick-fil-A, for example, like everybody knows Chick-fil-A. So there's no reason for somebody to come to me to have me introduce them to Chick-fil-A when they would just go directly to Chick-fil-A kind of thing. So, once they get to a certain threshold, they typically will kind of exit the model that I generally work with, but it's usually more expensive as well. Chick-fil-A is a little bit unique, but a lot of the other models, I mean, there's some that I'd never heard of that are, $1.5 million to open up like I can't remember even the name of it, but there's they have like 3 locations. One of them's in Vegas, and it's like a Oktoberfest like beer place or something like that. It looks awesome, but $1.5 million just to open your doors, and then so that's, again, I try to focus more with the $500,000 lower type scenario, but some will have name recognition, which are beneficial. There's some that with Ocala is unique because Ocala has been going through a lot of growth, but a lot of the franchises previously would skip over Ocala or would require like larger territories, so like Gainesville to Ocala, just to meet like minimum population requirements and things like that. So as Ocala continues to grow, it becomes more prevalent for some of the franchises too. And there's tons of franchises around here. There's one that the Voodoo Brewing, if you're familiar with them, they just have somebody in Ocala that moved down from New York that's going to be opening up, I think later this year. But there's a lot of cool stuff coming. But I don't know that I answered your question, but thank you for letting me talk so long.
Hey, still morning? Nope,
Sure.
afternoon.
Yeah, we're afternoon.
Heather Schuberg. I am with the Ocala Metro Chamber and Economic Partnership. This is kind of for both of you, but a little bit targeted to Brian. The program you were talking about with getting employees, are they using EB5 for that?
I have no idea.
Okay. Have either of you ever seen any franchisees with EB5 type of immigration pieces in that?
What is EB5?
It's
We'll talk
for immigration.
Yeah, so
yeah,
probably. I mean, they're. I think last time I talked to her, she had 375 people in her system. Mostly Orlando, but yeah, I think she works with 10 Chick-fil-A's down there, and then some other places as well. And then she has the whole cleaning business, which they're all over Central Florida.
So I'm not familiar with that one, but there's quite a few franchises I deal with that are the ET Visa. Right, but there's quite a few of those, and those I haven't personally worked with somebody, but that they typically, for whatever reason, have capital and are able to come in. So maybe that's something I should work on. But
So, guys, as we're rounding out towards the end, Brian, when you walk into another store, is there a secret handshake or a secret look so that they know you're an operator yourself? Yeah.
I know my order, and I order quickly, and I don't you don't have to ask me questions. I give it all to you. But no, we all have our pictures at the front of the restaurant, and so like if you recognize that person, you just say, hey, and you can tell them you're from wherever, and they're gonna go, oh yeah, I know you, even though they don't know you. That's our secret.
Yeah. What I want to do for both of you guys is how could people connect with you, and what kind of things are you looking for in a connection, like selfishly? Like, so let's start with Chris. Like, we've got a lot of people here, we're recording. Like, what are you looking for your business?
So that's a fair question. I wish I would have known. I would have put some more thought into that. Connections are great. Just helping people out if they're in a position to want to be helped out. That's good. My website is myfranchisefinders.com, so you can go there and kind of look through a portion of the franchise that are available. It lets you filter by dollar amount investment and things like that. So you can go do that. There's a little form that you can fill out there to contact me if need be. So as far as what I'm looking for, I don't know that I'm looking for anything other than to help some people if they're wanting to make the jump. So
Sounds good. Yeah, Ryan.
I need nice warm bodies, about 70 to 80 of them. No, so that's the thing with Chick-fil-A is that, we're known for our people, but it's getting harder and harder to find that caliber of people. People you always ask me, they say, hey, how do you find such great employees? And it's because we interview 10 for every one that we find. And of the one that we find, only about 25% of those actually pan out to be great employees. So we have growth opportunities. We hire, team members. We have leadership open right now. If you go to zippyapp.com, we have leadership positions we're hiring for now. We are going to be hiring for team members and everything, but this is a great stepping stone. Not only do you get, learning about the business, but also the growth opportunities and the inside track with Chick-fil-A of working in a restaurant and working up through a restaurant to then getting your own Chick-fil-A store is the fastest way to do it. It helps break a lot of the barriers because you're not one of the 100,000 people applying and saying, hey, I'd like to apply for a store. You're on the inside track of that. And you're able to go directly to them and say, hey, I'm ready to try this. And they'll tell you your next step.
So if I came and work at Chick-fil-A with you, do I get free sandwiches? Because I know you have a free giveaway here because you won't discount, but tell everybody what you're going to give them today.
Yeah, so he's got one of these, for example. So
You're not having mine.
It's a free Chick-fil-A sandwich or 8-nugget card. You can use it at any Chick-fil-A. Mine's closed right now. They charge it. They charge it back to me. Don't worry. But just to say thank you for coming. And with that, just that's what we're about. We're about like being a beacon in the community. I think standing by our faith has really helped us shine. Being closed on Sundays is something that is unheard of now. And to be the third largest restaurant in the United States and have one less day really says something.
Yeah. So do you guys, are there any questions that you would, or things that you would like to talk about that maybe I screwed up and did not ask you? So maybe start with Chris. Chris, are there any questions that I should have asked you that I didn't?
No.
Perfect. So I did a good job. All right, Brian, were there any questions or things that you would like to talk about that maybe I screwed up and did not ask?
No.
Boom. All right.
You're a great
So
host.
Thank you. All right. So guys, a round of applause for our guests. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to be here for about 15 minutes so you guys can engage with them. I know Jim and William, you guys are exploring maybe franchise models for your own business. So maybe have a chat with them. 15 minutes, and then I've got to take these guys out to lunch. So I'm going to be breaking free. 15 minutes, go.